Hello, everyone. It's time to get started. Hi, everyone. It's so great to see everyone here. My name is Teresa Liep. I'm Trellis Group's Nature Lead, and it's my pleasure to be your host today. A warm welcome also to everyone tuning in from the live stream to the live stream from around the world. Um, Tenemos traducción a español. Si alguien quiere escuchar en español, hay traducción afuera para que todos puedan entender. So, while we at Trellis are hosts today and tomorrow here at Bloom, we also acknowledge that we are guests here in Colombia, in Cali, and at COP16, and we really hope to make a meaningful contribution to all the other amazing things happening this week and next. So, thank you to the city of Cali for having us. And being here with Bloom alongside COP16 also means that there are more unfamiliar faces in the audience today than at the events that we usually host in the US. And I'm curious to test in just a second the distribution between old and new faces here in the room. But before we get to that, let me share one clarification. You may think that you don't know Trellis when you actually do, because we rebranded over the summer from Greenbiz to Trellis Group. So if you've known Greenbiz, you also know Trellis. And I'll admit that I was a little bit skeptical about the new name in the beginning because, as a non native English speaker, it just didn't mean anything to me. But once I heard the story behind it, it started making sense. So, for everyone else here who doesn't know, a trellis is the wooden support grid often used for roses and other plants to grow on. And we're excited about this new name because it really embodies what Greenbiz has been doing for the past 20 years and what Trellis is hoping to continue doing for decades to come. To serve as a support structure for sustainability professionals like you to learn, connect, and grow on. We do that with events like Bloom, our peer network, and our journalism. So, with that clarification out of the way, let's get a sense of who's here today and how you've engaged with us in the past. So, um, if we can pull up the next slides, here's a little graphic of our amazing newsletter, Trellis Briefing. Is anybody subscribed to that? We have a daily roundup of sustainability news, and we often feature biodiversity and nature stories. I'm subscribed. Yes. Okay. A few other people. And who has been to one of our other events that we've been running for much longer than Bloom, like Circularity, Greenbiz, Verge, Greenfin? Yes. Some some hands up. And lastly, perhaps most importantly, who was at Bloom last year in California? Yay. All right. Welcome back for everyone who has been with us before, and welcome everyone else to the Trellis community. So, why are we gathering here at Bloom today? We believe that halting and reversing nature loss is impossible without fundamental shifts by the private sector. And in turn, the ability of companies to continue operating far into the future is intimately tied to protecting biodiversity. Recognizing that interconnection and acting accordingly will lie at the heart of a healthy and resilient economy. Business leaders started grasping those concepts at COP15 in Montreal 2 years ago, but they didn't quite know what to do about it. So we launched Bloom and our other nature initiatives to help companies and financial institutions understand how and why they could move from depleting to regenerating biodiversity. We wanted to bring people embarking on this journey together and create a community of peers that could help each other along the way. And it's great to see that community actually coming together now and see you all returning from one year to the next. So since Bloom's inaugural edition last year, a lot has happened in the nature space. Companies have adopted nature strategies and hired experts to implement them. Monitoring technologies have made big strides, and new financial vehicles were adopted. And while doing this work, we've all tried really hard to blend conservation goals into business language to hone in on the ROI of doing this work and to not come across as nerds and naturalists who care about birds but don't understand economic realities. And while that's really important to some extent, I urge you all to not take that too far. As my amazing colleague Alex Navarro, Alex over there, likes to remind me, people love birds and bears and beavers. We're drawn to and fascinated by them. So let's use that love for nature to build bridges between the sustainability community and other business leaders to draw in new and diverse perspectives and demographics. We need everybody to be a part of this community. And honestly, let's be grateful every time we can talk about a cool species rather than having to go over the ins and outs of carbon dioxide equivalents or chemical plastics recycling. That's a lot more fun. Through 3 life stages, from egg to nymph to adult, transforming effortlessly from one stage to the next when the time has come. They're also highly adaptive. They can jump 60 times their body length. We would have to jump the long side of an entire football field if humans could jump that far. And finally, crickets have an authentic voice, chirping to defend themselves and attract mates. And when they come together to sing as a big choir, they bring vibrant nightscapes to life. Their song will always bring me back to a nice bonfire on a warm summer night. These and other characteristics have helped crickets survive and thrive for over 300 million years. And they offer valuable questions for today's theme of what companies can do to halt and reverse nature loss within their operations and supply chains. First question: what life stage is your company in on the spectrum from extractive to sustainable to regenerative? How can you enable the necessary transformation? Second, how adaptive is your business? Can you leap at the risks and opportunities emerging as biodiversity is gaining traction? And third, do you have an authentic voice? Do you ever sing in a choir with peers and other like-minded organizations? And what about your personal voice? How does it resonate with your colleagues, peers, and community at large on the topic of nature and biodiversity? Those are some of the key questions we'll be addressing throughout the program today. And I'd love to kick off the discussion right now. So I invite you all to turn to a person next to you, in front of you, behind you, ideally someone you don't know yet, and talk to them about which of those themes resonates most with you right now and why. So everyone has 2 minutes to share, and then we'll regroup.
Test. En inglés, ¿cierto?
5 minutos. ¿Tiene allá el tiempo que va a bajar? Ok, bueno. All right.
Test.
Okay,
Test.
let's let's get back to the program. Let's get back to the program, please. Can we play a sound? Hello, everyone. Okay, all right. You all have a lot to share, which is very exciting. And you'll have a lot more opportunity to chat um, for the rest of today because the program will be all interactive after the main stage program. But for now, I'm very pleased to welcome Alejandro Eder, the mayor of the city of Cali, on stage, who will welcome all of you here and share with us what it means for Cali to be hosting COP16 and how Cali is trying to incentivize companies here in the region to protect nature and biodiversity. Please welcome to the stage, Mayor Eder. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me? All right. That's me, but I think they put more hair on my head. That picture. Well, welcome to Cali. It's really a true honor to have you here. I know this is the first time you host this conference here in obviously in Cali, but I believe also in Colombia. This is uh a wonderful city. We actually in Spanish we call it sucursal del cielo, which means branch office to heaven. It's a very beautiful city. As you can see, it's a very biodiverse city. We're one of the most biodiverse cities in Colombia and hence one of the most biodiverse cities in the world. Just to give you one number, we have over 550 species of birds here in Cali. And we had a new species, the newest one that was discovered. It's called the Tororoi bailador, the Tororoi dancer, and it was discovered just 7 years ago. So that's great news in a moment in history when we only hear about species being extinct, not the discovery of new species. Cali is also a thriving economic center in Colombia. It's actually Colombia's first economic miracle. In the early 20th century, Cali was a small town. It had about 8,000 or 10,000 people. And then in the early 20th century, a railroad was built from the coffee growing region to the Pacific Ocean, which went through Cali, and that revolutionized the city. Then, when the airplane came around, the flights from New York to Santiago in Chile would go through Cali. They would go like from New York to Miami to Kingston to Panama to Cali to Lima and then down to Santiago. It was a pretty long flight. Uh, but when people would stop over at Cali, they'd stop by and they'd say, "Wow, this place is pretty cool. The weather's great. The men are really handsome, and uh, and it's very beautiful." So a lot of American businessmen that would go down to the Southern Cone, they would stop over here. And then when the Andean Community of Nations, the first free trade agreement came about, a lot of multinationals, especially US multinationals, set up shop here in Cali. Today, Cali is the third most important city in Colombia, but we have the largest industrial base for export industries. We have 18% of Colombia's industrial base here in Cali, 22% of Colombia's agro-industrial base. We have around 12 of Colombia's best universities, including Universidad del Valle, which is Colombia's best provincial public university. And we have a university called ICESI, Javeriana, Autónoma. We have various other private universities that are also among Colombia and Latin America's best. And we have a very well developed healthcare sector. We actually have the best public and private healthcare network in the country and one of the best in Latin America. We have three of Latin America's top 15 hospitals are here in Cali, and we actually get a lot of medical tourism from other countries, from Central America, from Chile, but also from Spain, also from the US. A lot of people from the southern US, from Florida, from Tennessee, from Georgia, they actually come down to Cali for simple procedures like just going to the dentist. You know, a procedure that in the US might cost $5,000, here in Cali it'll cost $1,000. You know, so they can come down to Cali, get their teeth fixed, go dance some salsa, and then fly back to the States. So it's actually much funner. And Cali is also a city that's very strong in the homegrown tech sector. Out of Colombia's, obviously Colombia is not a tech powerhouse, but we do have a lot of very big tech multinationals. Out of Colombia's top 10 tech companies, four of them are based here in Cali, and one of them, Rappi, which you may have heard of, is actually was born in Cali and is owned by people, by caleños, as we would say. Um, in Currently, we're clearly hosting the COP16 summit. That's why you guys are all here. And for us, it was very important to be the host city of the COP16 summit because, you know, Cali has been very important in Latin America, or was for many years, all throughout the 20th century. But unfortunately, we fell in hard times um, over the past 30 years because of the drug trade and drug violence, because of the FARC, because of terrorism, because of the violence that Colombia went through. But Cali is kind of going through a renaissance right now, and that's what we're trying to push forward. Cali is still Cali. Cali is still a tech powerhouse. Cali is still an educational powerhouse. Cali still has, like I said, a strong medical sector. But we just need to get Cali up, and flying high again. So that's what we're doing. We wanted to invite the whole world here also because, like I mentioned, Cali is the most biodiverse city in the second most biodiverse country in the world. The first one is Brazil, just because they're much larger. But if we look at it at biodiversity per square meter, from what I understand, from what I've heard in the conferences here, Cali is actually the number one. I'm sorry, Colombia is actually the number one most biodiverse country. And that's a huge responsibility that Colombia has with the world. Because in order to protect the world from global warming, we need to preserve biodiversity. And we haven't been doing it right. So by bringing the COP16 summit, we're not only bringing all of you guys down here so that you can see what a great country this is, what a great city this is, and all the opportunities we have, but also so that we can create that awareness here in Colombia and here in Cali. And then I'll close with this because I think my time's up. Cali is within the Choco uh, bioregion, which is a biodiversity hotspot, which is perhaps one of the most strategic hotspots in the world, but it's the least known. It goes from Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, and northern Peru, all along the Pacific coast. So one of our objectives here is to make the world aware that the Choco bioregion exists and that we need to protect it. Number two is that in Colombia, that the main threat to biodiversity in the world today, especially in the tropics and particularly in South America and Colombia, are illegal economies. The cocaine trade, or the cocaine agro industry, because that's what it is, the illegal mining and illegal timbering, but also illegal migration. You know, illegal migration to the States actually destroys a lot of ecosystems on the path that people go through. Just to give you a number, for every kilo of cocaine that's produced, 80 kilos of precursor chemicals are thrown into the jungles and into the rivers of Colombia. And that's something that few people have looked into, and that's another reason why we need to eradicate that evil. The second objective that we have is to foment um, the biotech sector here in Cali. I'm sure you're going to find a lot of opportunities. We already have some advanced in that direction, and you're going to hear a lot about it here. And the third
that we've just released today called The State of Business and Biodiversity. It's a piece of work that we've been doing over the past few months at Trellis Group, where we've looked at what our audience thinks about how their companies are addressing nature and biodiversity. And I'm really excited to have this content as part of the program today because we all who are here, we're very deep in the nature and biodiversity bubble, including myself. And sometimes it's hard to continue seeing the big picture. And so I think it's great for all of us to have a little bit of shared data and knowledge to base our conversations off of for the rest of today and tomorrow. So we'll go over the findings of the report, a few of them, and I encourage you all to look at it in more detail later. There's some really great insights in this, doing some pilot projects, and another quarter kind of doing more significant interventions. Eva, I'm curious, you have been with Business for Nature trying really hard to get people from the beginning of this graph to the end of this graph and helping more companies do more meaningful action. How does this resonate with you? And how do you think we can change that?
Thanks so much. Thank you. And so great to be here. Really appreciate it. I actually think that is a very positive story because that means that only 20% right now aren't doing anything.
Yeah.
Right. So it means that we're on the journey already. And I do think that we've come so far, so fast. If I was in consulting speak, I'd say nature's on, like climate, supercharged. Because it's true when you think of the journey of businesses. Global Biodiversity Framework, and let's just dig into one example of Target 15, which I think a number of you have been very aware of, the assessment and disclosure. And look how the regulatory environment with CSRD, the stimulus from the Chinese 3 major stock exchanges, making it mandatory for companies to disclose on nature, these are sending signals that means we're going faster than ever. So for me, I feel like there are signals that, of course, the progress isn't fast enough, but there has been significant developments. We've got more than 450 companies now committed to adopt the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, 150 companies ready to use SBTN. We've got 26 strategies for nature on the It's Now for Nature campaign that's going to 2030, and that number is just going exponentially. And here in Cali, we have over 230 companies that are calling on governments for renewed policy ambition, because that change of the level playing field and the regulatory environment is what will get us to the scale. And the final thing I want to say in terms of this evolution and what this tells us is that, you know, at the COP16, we were worried collectively after COP15, after such an amazing success, unprecedented business and finance representation. We were worried that nature might fall off the business agenda. But here we can say with confidence, nature has a confirmed seat at the business table. Can you imagine a company now saying, oh, nature was a priority, and you know what? We decided to sort of say it's not a priority anymore, or we're not going to do anything anymore. No, it's a one-directional thing that's happening here. And there are more companies and financial institutions in Cali at COP16 than there were in Montreal. And that gives a strong signal of the direction to help shift this curve.
Yeah. And thank you so much for being like one of the main people and organizations in making all of that happen. So let's look a little bit deeper. We also ask people what kinds of commitments they've made in specific areas that are important to nature when it comes to land use, when it comes to water use, plastics and chemicals, and then also oceans. And curious how this compares to your experience, like trying to get Unilever to act on these different levels. Why are we seeing those differences?
Well, thank you so much, Teresa, for having us here. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm sure you all share my admiration for the amazing leadership that Colombia, Cali, and particularly the COP president, Susanna Mohammed, has shown in bringing us all together here. I thought this was a fascinating slide for a number of reasons. Firstly, I think what I see in that slide is that where you have a connection to companies' climate transition plans, you see greater action. And that's, perhaps not a surprise. A lot of companies have done climate plans since the Paris Agreement or before. The 10 years, basically along that journey, if you've got an agricultural or a tropical commodity footprint, that is going to be part of your climate plan. So I think we've got to be a little bit kind to ourselves that a 10-year run up on implementing some of that action is now being embedded into companies in a way that some of the other issues linked to biodiversity and nature are not yet there. I suppose the flip side of that is that even you said here that these are companies that affect these systems.
Yeah.
You're barely seeing a majority of companies that say yes, we have an impact on agriculture, we have an impact on forests, but somehow this is not part of our public commitments. And my only reading of that really is that companies have just found it easier to grapple with issues of the geosphere than the biosphere. If you're talking about where do we get our energy from and where do our suppliers get their energy from, it's a relatively straightforward conversation by comparison with the complexity of the sort of the web of life that supports us all and how we think about that infinite complexity. I had a fascinating experience earlier this week on a panel with Professor Zachary, who was one of the founding chairs of the IPBES, Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. If ever an acronym was necessary, IPBES is it. And he was unapologetic in his assertion that we've just got the prioritization wrong of climate versus nature, that the risk of biodiversity collapse is far greater than the risk of global warming. And I think in a lot of the conversations that I have privately with other corporate leaders in the sustainability space, that is a conversation people are having. Have we put too much emphasis on one versus the other? Not that we should do less on climate, but do we need to rapidly address that balance? And I think it is possible for companies to begin to engage even within that complexity. We've certainly found it's possible to craft quite simple, clear targets that the business can mobilize around, whether that's, 1 million hectares of restoration and protection, 1 million hectares of regenerative agriculture. You can build in sort of proxy indicators for doing good stuff on nature that the companies can manage. And I think we need to look to mainstream those sorts of indicators in the way that climate targets have been mainstreamed through business.
Yeah. And I think one thing to recognize also that this only asks about public commitments. I think there's a lot of commitments behind the scenes that are not public, especially as more regulatory pressure is coming out on these systems. So that's something that we hear in conversations within the Trellis network a lot. I'm curious about oceans. Oceans are so important, and I think companies are still really struggling to understand what to do about it. What do you think about those 18% of companies who are impacting oceans are having commitments?
I think that's absolutely the hardest. I worry more actually about the forest number being so low.
Yeah.
I mean, forests we all understand. Our oceans, people I think often don't understand what's going on there and why that matters. Forests, everybody intuitively knows why they're so critical, and yet to only see 38% of companies saying we're taking action on that. And I think there is a need to pivot the forest conversation from something that only companies that have a very obvious link to forests think, well, we'll get involved in there. There are all kinds of things that companies even not connected to forests can do. I don't know if there are folks here from the Leaf Coalition, really interesting new effort that launched at COP26 in Glasgow, providing a way for all kinds of companies to get into sort of systemic efforts for forest protection. And maybe we need something like that on oceans too. I don't know, but
Yeah. I was quite surprised about the forests as well, because deforestation has been around for so long and there's so much work happening in this space. All right. So the last kind of piece of data that we're going to look at is roadblocks. And my clicker is not working, so someone can advance the slide, please. There we go. So here we've asked people about what are the roadblocks that you're facing in trying to get more attention and more action when it comes to nature and biodiversity. And you can download this report and have it on your laptop later, and all the graphs are in there. So it was surprising to me to not see a big difference between these roadblocks in some ways. So people struggle with expertise and staff. They struggle with competing priorities for other sustainability goals that companies have. They're struggling with the lack of definitions and standard, and then also management commitments and having clarity on what the financial returns are of doing this work. Geneva, does that resonate based on the work that you do with your clients at Deloitte, or does that make sense? And how do you help people address those roadblocks?
Well, certainly, I think you can hear me okay. Thank you. No?
No.
Oh, sorry. Grant,
it is
said it was
on.
on. Here, can you switch? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. When I looked at the data, what I actually saw was these are the standard talking points that we hear, right? We don't have enough people. We don't have enough skills, expertise. We're needing to use subcontractors, right? But many of these that are in your control, I think, are more of systems that organizations aren't dealing holistically and systematically with sustainability more broadly. So it's not just about nature and climate. It actually is about your broader sustainability strategy and how it is or is not tied to other drivers of value, and particularly shareholder value. And I'm going to get to that in a moment, because the one that also stuck out for me was the lack of consistent definitions, terms, measurement, reporting standards on nature and biodiversity. And many of us have often heard that story that, it's taken financial reporting 100 to 120 years to get here, so we need to be patient. In reality, I mean, when the GRI came out in the 1990s, there was already standard measurements and definitions around things like total water use, total land reclaimed. There have been these definitions over time, and perhaps too many standards, definitions that came out from that. But the international financial reporting standards didn't really become established until the early part of this century. And it's continually evolved. It's continually progressing as there's been new experiences and changes. Things like the financial crisis changed, modified it. We're also seeing the measurement of things like fair value, intellectual property. Accountants are relying on professional judgment and interpretations and different guidance to be able to determine actually what is that fair value definition itself. It's not dissimilar to what we're seeing with terms like biodiversity impact, ecosystem goods and services, and others. The thing is that very much like financial reporting, there is a continual learning and evolution and a maturity. And we are seeing that with the consolidation, the release of the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, ISB, and others. There's going to be new standards on human capital and natural capital coming out from the IFRS. So this is just actually how these things work. And I share this because I think it also is what we need to see when it comes to sustainability, is that the transformation that's needed to address aspects around insufficient capacity, skill sets. We need more proactive workforce planning. When it comes, this is the same experience with climate. So we need to think more holistically. We need to plan ahead and be proactive. We need to be looking at how are organizations defining value, and defining value in a way that considers shareholder, natural, social, and human capital at the same time, so that you can make trade-off. Thank you. Make trade-off decisions. But we can talk a little bit more about that, because I have some ideas about how to get to the next level and that transformation that you need.
I would love to hear those from all of you. How do we get to the next level? And are there any kind of roadblocks that don't come up here that you think are really kind of important to highlight? Thomas or Eva?
Yeah, well, maybe building on what building on what you were just saying, Geneva.
Yeah.
I think we also have an issue which we've got to get over, which is that it is inherently quite complicated to understand and assess and value natural, social, and human capital. It's totally is doable, but just because the skills aren't in place or the resources aren't in place yet shouldn't be an excuse not to then do it. So I would push back. The other day, I was speaking to the CEO of a quite a big company and their chief sustainability officer, and we were talking about CSRD. And it's funny because it's a company that's done a lot and should be very well equipped to be able to then be ready for the CSRD. As we hear many companies saying, yeah, we've been leaning in on this, so actually when CSRD comes, we're well equipped. But it is a burden. It's a big lift. And the CSO was saying, oh, but now with CSRD, like we need a 20 FTE, or it was the CEO saying, now we need a 20 FTE to be able to address this gap in resourcing, compared to previously with only a couple of people. And the reaction was, so that's a problem, which I can understand. But you flip it on its head. You say, so for your financial accounting and reporting, what's the size of your team? And would you be compromising on quality of that will drive the action? Well, no, because you've gone through that transition internally. And this is a super painful transition that we're all part of, but it's a necessary one that we need to stick together, support the companies as we progress, because we've got headwinds with geopolitics, with inflation. There are other things obviously on people's minds. Let's not get stuck in it's too complicated because we've never done it before, but rather how do we support each other through this transition? And one of the mindset shifts that is a barrier that I think we all are a bit guilty of in this community is we can be so critical. We can be so critical of each other's methodologies, efforts, work. I'm not saying we shouldn't be rigorous. We should be, but we should also make sure that we are being positive and practical and not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's a classic expression, but it's one that we see so much. And similarly, we shouldn't be creating a competition between climate and nature. We know it's not, but then we keep on still slipping back into, well, actually, it should be all mixed up all together. So I think there's a mental brain of challenge and that we need to overcome here. And we can do it if we continue to be consistent and clear in what needs to happen, that we support the companies on that journey.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think one thing that companies need to understand is that, like right now, a lot of what I hear is that the internal sustainability resources are shifting from doing sustainability projects to doing CSRD. And that's not what we need. We just need like an expansion of the work. Thomas?
I wanted to come in on this point about the 20 FTE team, and those sorts of numbers you might be able to absorb in a Unilever, but a lot of the world is not big multinational companies. A lot of the world is small and medium-sized companies, or even big companies that wouldn't be able to cope with a 20-person addition overnight. And I do worry that sort of narrative might act as a barrier to leadership, going, this is something we really need to do right now. And I'm a big believer in, you can do something. Yes, you can do very complex assessments of your corporate footprint, which big companies are doing. But like if you're a small and medium-sized company, you can probably intuitively get quite quickly to a sense of where are your big impacts. What are one or two things you could start doing now to get moving on this journey? And I mean, you said it already. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and we've just got to get going.
Yeah, and just to kind of dig a little bit deeper into that, do you have any kind of tips to share for how you've made the business case at Unilever to have expertise and have resources dedicated to nature and biodiversity?
Well, I think historically we've come on a kind of environmental journey that's been rooted in our supply chains, tropical commodities, palm oil, things like that, with known ecosystem impacts have been a focus for 20 years or so in the company. And so we've come at that, frankly, from a kind of reputation management, risk management issue in the early days, in the early 2000s, when you didn't want the association at all of being close to deforestation anyway. So that's driven that. But I think the rationale for doing it now is changing into a broader knowledge of the importance of biodiversity and ecosystems. But I think what the reason for doing it in your company may be different, but you've got to find the reason that works for you to engage and then build a business case around that.
Makes sense. Geneva?
I think a lot of organizations may see something like CSRD and ESRS as a compliance task, an administrative burden. I'm an eternal optimist, so I see it as such a great opportunity. These regulations are the expression of the public's expectations. Thanks. So I explained earlier, I have not spoken live since before COVID. It's so much easier just to have my little headset on sitting in front of a screen. So It is so much nicer. Believe me, I'm so glad to be here. It's so lovely to actually speak to live people and feel your energy. But yeah, I just think that there is an amazing opportunity if organizations can look at something like ESRS, they're going to find opportunities to streamline their business processes and find how to reallocate individuals to other tasks. For example, I worked with an organization where they had 8 people spending about 40 hours a month each producing 8 reports of sustainability data internally that no one was reading. Awesome opportunity to put them to a different project, improve the controls, support, say, your new ESG controller if that's a function that you're actually having. This is amazing. Think of your internal audit function. They love to be engaged, they love to be in service and of value. And so they could be the ones that could be helping in and doing pre assurance, doing your process and your data mapping for those 1,000+ indicators and actually showing value to the organization, but they're often not tapped because they're not part of the sustainability team doing sustainability projects. Your supply chain team as well could be engaged. So your organization needs to be seen very much like an ecosystem. It is a living system. It is dynamic. It has a collection of parts, and every single part has a role to play in the sustainability transformation. There's your untapped people and talent with capabilities. That's going to address that. Showing that through your sustainability project, you're tying it to shareholder value. For example, if you improve workforce environments, and there is research for this, if you add plants in an office, you can add anywhere from 2 to 20% of worker productivity. That's something your CFO wants to hear about. But that may be a very, very small amount of investment. And you can get your workforce back into the office because of the environment itself. There are thousands of stories and data points and research that shows that if you think about it systematically and holistically, you can do it through a management system or other transformation project. But we have to move away from piecemeal individual projects, pilots, initiatives, etc. It has to be done in concert and progress over time. It's not a one and done.
All right. To wrap things up, Eva, are there any tools, resources that you'd like to point people to kind of make progress on developing a holistic nature strategy and get those projects going?
Yes. Thanks for asking. Good. And nowfornature.org. It's Now for Nature is a global campaign. We've got a nature strategy handbook. It's 12 pages. Check it out. It's available in multiple languages and it builds on all the existing tools out there. We know companies that have cut and pasted the key questions you should be asking yourself as you assess, commit, transform, disclose, and just bringing those into the executive teams or even board and discussing, are you ready with your strategy? Where is nature in your business strategy? So that is a tool. And maybe, I guess, just wrapping up on one takeaway is we have a very precious thing in the nature community, if you want, which is that we all actually talk a lot to each other. And we not only talk, but collaborate deeply so that we can try and streamline and simplify and provide consistency, confidence, and clarity. I am overwhelmed by how much consistency, confidence, and clarity there is in the business world. And we are showing the way. Nature is now clearly established on the business agenda. What we need to be calling for also at COP16 is that businesses need to have their roadmap as part of the national strategies and action plans, the NBSAPs, to help us achieve the global biodiversity framework. If governments provide that clarity of what the roadmap is, businesses will have the political certainty and can help plan themselves to contribute. Business has a disproportionately important role, and finance too, in this transition. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for that call out. All right, and with that, we're at the end of our session. Here is the QR code for you all to download the report and dig a little bit deeper into the findings, share them with your colleagues and friends. And please join me in thanking our panelists to help us make content. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So now we're going to move from the big picture nature strategy level to looking at what's happening on the ground here in the region in Latin America, in Colombia, and in Brazil, in terms of moving from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy, which a lot of organizations here call a bioeconomy. And while I think really getting the strategy level right for companies and financial institutions is a really important step, it's equally important to start doing projects on the ground and start with the work and do that in collaboration with the local communities, with indigenous people, and advance this work together. So I'm really pleased to now welcome Carolina Garcia to the stage, who's going to moderate a conversation with Fanny Cuiro, who is the general coordinator of COICA, and Angela Pignati, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer at Natura. So welcome to the stage, and welcome also Atosa Sultani, who kindly volunteered to translate for time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Colombia. Bienvenidos a Colombia. I'm Carolina Garcia Arbeláez, and I'm the co-founder of Mycelio, which is a one-of-a-kind sustainability firm that is helping organizations boost the impact that they can have in the world. And I'm very happy to be sitting down in this panel with this amazing woman, because I don't know if you have the same intuition, but I'm a firm believer that women are playing a crucial role in protecting Mother Earth and safeguarding nature. And here with us, well, three remarkable women. On the one hand, Fanny Cuiro, who is not only the first woman who has been leading the largest organization in the Amazon, la primera mujer en liderar COICA, que es la organización amazónica de indígenas más grande del mundo, but also fabulous Atosa, making the translation for all of you to hear it in English, and Angela from Natura, that has been always a beacon and a flagship of how companies can integrate sustainability. And this panel is quite interesting because we have somewhat unexpected partners, or historically unexpected partners, the business sector, the private sector, and indigenous communities, and we're seeing how they can meet, where indigenous vision and corporate strategy meet. And I'm going to start with a hard question. Fanny, you're coming from a legacy of an extractive relationship with the rubber industry and your community with Toto in the Amazon. And you're coming from that legacy, and we want to acknowledge that. But also, that has been evolving so much through time. And now there's many opportunities for partnerships between the private sector and the indigenous communities to foster a new bioeconomy. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on how do you think that companies can work hand in hand with indigenous communities so we are really sharing the value of the bioeconomy. And before I'm going to quickly translate this question for Fanny, we'll hand it over to you, and then Atosa will do that wonderful translation. So, Fanny, queremos reconocer que vienes de un legado de extracción de la industria del caucho, que fue una muy mala práctica en la Amazonía y afectó muchísimo a la comunidad Huitoto y demás comunidades. Pero también vemos que esto está cambiando y venimos evolucionando y hay muchas oportunidades para hacer muy bien el trabajo de valor compartido entre las comunidades indígenas y el sector privado. ¿Cómo crees que deberían trabajar las empresas de la mano de las comunidades indígenas y qué consejos les puedes dar?
Bueno, muchísimas gracias por este espacio. Un saludo especial para todos ustedes de los 511 pueblos indígenas que habita la cuenca amazónica. Un espacio vital e importante para el mundo, para la humanidad y para el planeta.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. I'm here on representation of the 511 indigenous nations that occupy the Amazon basin, which is a vital space for life on this planet.
Bueno, primero quiero dejar claro que los pueblos indígenas que habitamos esa vasta región amazónica somos los dueños milenarios de los territorios y de los recursos naturales que tenemos en esos territorios.
I want to remind us that indigenous peoples who've lived here for thousands of years are the owners of the territories in which they occupy and also the resources that are therein.
Lo que no queremos es que se repita las historias de dolor, las historias de genocidio contra los pueblos indígenas por extraer la materia prima de nuestros territorios.
What we don't want is that history repeat itself, where in search for primary materials, raw materials, there was exploitation and genocide of indigenous peoples.
Bueno, como decía Carolina, el tiempo ha avanzado. Los pueblos indígenas tenemos el reconocimiento de nuestros derechos por nuestros estados, pero yo creo que falta mucho que eso sea una realidad, que se respete de manera efectiva los derechos en los territorios indígenas.
We've advanced quite a bit since then, but and that our rights are being recognized by our states, our governments are beginning to recognize, but there's a lot of practice that's missing. And in practice, the effective implementation of our rights is still has a long way to go.
Entonces, ¿cómo debemos trabajar en adelante con las empresas privadas o también nuestros emprendimientos propios que hoy estamos trabajando en el marco de la llamada bioeconomía, pero para nosotros sigue siendo la economía indígena, la economía de conservación, la economía para la vida, no para la muerte, y la economía que tiene unos principios como la reciprocidad, la solidaridad, la no acumulación.
So how do we move forward now working with the private sector and other sectors as well? In fact, indigenous peoples, we have our own enterprises as well, and that we're really moving towards the indigenous economy, an indigenous economy that's in service to life, that's not accumulative, that's not about wealth accumulation, but it's about solidarity, it's about conservation, it's about reciprocity with life.
Y las empresas yo creo que tienen una gran responsabilidad de conocer a fondo cómo llega la materia prima de los territorios indígenas a sus empresas. Hay quejas de hermanos. Yo soy la coordinadora general y todos los días atiendo y recibo quejas de las comunidades que a veces la materia prima se obtiene con un pago mínimo que no garantiza una vida digna para los pueblos indígenas. Sin embargo, sacan su materia prima, o sea, los recursos naturales de sus territorios y a cambio no queda nada. Pero hay otras empresas también que trabajan directamente en territorio, obtienen la materia prima, conocen los derechos, conocen a los mismos indígenas y trabajan mancomunadamente para obtener la materia prima. Entonces, creo que es una buena práctica que la empresa conozca, que se haga la trazabilidad de los recursos naturales que sirven materia prima para su producción.
So here companies have a responsibility to make sure that the raw materials that are their supply chains not come from destruction or exploitation, that, there are general principles around, basically how you extract materials in a sustainable and regenerative way. And also how, I'm the general coordinator of COICA. Every day I receive complaints from our base communities about how companies come and exploit their resources and how they often don't pay them very much. That the amount of money that they get, like nothing is left behind after the products are purchased. And that really we need is to have good practices, best practices around supply chain. We need to make sure that indigenous people are properly compensated and that there is, respect and reciprocity in the resources that are extracted.
Thank you, Fanny, and thank you, Atosa. And I think this is a great transition to pass it over to Angela, CSO of Natura, because Natura has been one of the companies that first began working with the Amazon that has great experience in traceability and creating shared value with communities. So can you tell us a little bit about Natura's experience working with indigenous communities and perhaps the story of your very inspiring brand, Eclos?
So first, thank you so much for invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to share this panel with such wonderful and lovely women. For those who does not know Natura, Natura is a Brazilian multinational cosmetic company, the largest one in South America. Most part of our business is based in direct sales. And within this model, we have 4 million beauty consultants selling our products in Latin America and 7 million people worldwide, which makes a completely different, how can I say, relationship with this community as well. But focusing on Natura development and regarding sustainability, in the years of 2000, we launched the Ecos Cosmetic brand that is based in bioingredients from socio-biodiversity from Amazon rainforest. And since then, we've been checking the whole supply chain. So one of the things that's really important is to have a dedicated team to guarantee the whole traceability of our supply chains. So we have more than 20 people that are working on a daily basis together within these communities. From 2000 up to now, we work with 44 different communities, which encompasses more than 11,000 families in Amazon rainforest. And we have more than 45 bioactives such as andiroba, ucuba, Brazilian nuts, and other ingredients. No, specifically with indigenous people, we work with three indigenous people, the Deni in Médio Juruá, they provided to us andiroba, the Cinta Larga in Mato Grosso, and they provide Brazilian nuts for us. And then we have the third one that are the Araras community, that is from the terras of Meio Altamira, that they provide the Murumuru species for us. One very important thing to share is that in the beginning of this whole process, we used to buy seed from these communities. And within the time, as our demand evolved a lot, we implemented in the cooperatives, in the communities, small factories for them to extract or the oil or the butter in order to have a more valuable product to sell to us. And this helped us also to reduce our impact in the carbon footprint. Moreover, I would like just to share, I think, our key principles to have the relationship not only with the indigenous peoples to guarantee a fair and equitable relation, but also with the traditional families, no? So which we have everything in our biodiversity policy. So the first thing for us that's crucial is to respect for the rights of traditional people and communities. This is fundamental for us. It is important to have free, prior, and informed consent to work with them. Ethical sourcing and regenerative practice. So, as I said, we have the traceability of our whole supply chain, and it's certified for the UEBT, that's the Union for Ethical Biotrade. It's important to have lasting partnerships. So we are in this process for 25 years. You cannot start a relationship and stop after 1 year. No, we need to promote local value addition and decent income, human rights and gender equity in the communities, recognize the value of cultural heritage, material and immaterial, act always as a territory approach and easily accessible and reliable communication channels with the communities. No, and the last thing is that we always like to have the whole structure to work with cooperatives and communities in order to have a strong and well-established relationship with the communities. I think these are the key points. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And yes, it is very important the role of partnerships, and indigenous communities not only need to partner with the private sector, but the role of multilateral banks is also key. And Fanny, I know that your legacy right now and one of your biggest achievements has been the establishment of the Amazon Fund. So before you leave, and I know that you're running for another commitment soon, I just want you to tell everyone about this fund and how you're mobilizing public funds to protect the Amazon. So, Fanny, sé que te tienes que ir muy pronto, pero antes de que te vayas, no quiero dejar pasar que nos cuentes un poco del Fondo Amazonía para la Vida, porque sé que es uno de los legados más grandes que quieres dejar en la COICA y que es muy importante que también la banca multilateral trabaje de la mano con las comunidades indígenas. Así que antes de que te vayas, por favor, cuéntanos un poquito de eso.
Ya. Muchas gracias. Sí, hoy el BIC y la COICA ha creado un fondo que se llama Fondo Indígena Amazonía para la Vida, para que los pueblos indígenas tengamos la oportunidad de tener nuestros propios bioemprendimientos o, bueno, empezar a trabajar todo lo que es la economía indígena. Y en esto necesitamos aliados, socios y no patrones. Eso es lo que necesitamos en adelante. Así que todos los que quieran trabajar y apoyar este fondo también, porque también las empresas privadas pueden aportar y apoyar este fondo para trabajar la bioeconomía en la Amazonía, que hoy está de moda la bioeconomía. Todos son bienvenidos. Y me despido de una vez porque tengo un compromiso urgente cerca.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. And Danny has to rush off to a very important meeting that's urgent for her, so she's gonna have to say goodbye. But really, one of the biggest things that she's trying to leave behind is the Amazon Fund for Life, which is a bioeconomy fund together with COICA and the IDB. And this fund is going to support the bioeconomy, the solidarity economy, and here to really support the indigenous economy. And we're inviting partners. We are looking for partners, but we're not looking for ownership. We're looking for allyship. And that really this is about bringing together economies that serve life, economies that serve indigenous peoples, and to find ways to work together in this idea of the bioeconomy, which is, of course, is the latest buzzword, the bioeconomy, really finding a way to have economies in service to people's well-being and service to life.
Thanks so much, Fanny, and thank you, Atosa. Let's give her a round of applause and go, go, go. I know that you need to. Yes, no, we stay. We still have a couple of minutes, and this is a really interesting conversation. So please don't leave me. I don't want to stay alone in this panel. But COP agenda is quite difficult. So we're trying to make sure everything works out. So I think Natura's case is very inspiring, and many companies that want to foster the bioeconomy want to start working with indigenous communities, and probably they don't know how. So can you share some best practices and also like very tangible actions or advice that you can give other companies that want to start working in an equitable way with indigenous communities?
So I would say we needed to understand what whole plays biodiversity on your strategy. So for Natura, it was always quite clear that was in the main strategy of the company. It could be an economic value, no? So by saying that, I think this is the first point of view. The second part is that you needed to understand what are your whole supply chain, understand the impacts and the impacts and dependencies that you are going to have in each place, that you are going to work with. to understand quite well which are the legislation and the regulations that we have for a specific country and how to deal when to start the relationship with these communities, not just for indigenous, but also for the traditional communities. It is important, you know. So as I said, for me, the free, prior, and informed consent is something quite crucial to start this relationship. And before starting, having quite clear the impact that you're having in this community. So it gotta be a long-term relationship. Otherwise, you're going to uh, get them frustrated. And this is we need to understand the real impact that a company can have in a territory. I think this is super important. What else? I think so. I said about long relationship, the impact of the economic impact. Then capacitation, it's important, really important. So to have a dedicated team together and being with frequency in these communities, it is important to guarantee that you are not going to have problems with traceability, problems with slavery, all kind of um, critical problems you can have in any kind of supply chain that everybody knows. No, and for me to guarantee that it is a stronger relationship, you trust in the community and they trust on you. So besides that, we have all the challenges. No, it's not, it's easy to come here and to say the story after 25 years, but we need to understand that during these 25 years, we have lots of constraints and difficulties as well. So working the Amazon rainforest region is not easy. We have huge costs regarding all the logistic aspects of this region to send the product, for example, from the Amazon to São Paulo. It's not a simple logistic one. I think we still are struggling with the financial, how to financing the nature positive solutions. So we are just on the way to, for example, scale up the agroforest system for palm oil dende. And we need to have money to invest and to transform this agroforest system. You can regenerate the forest, so it's a huge transformation of this business. But we needed to find ways to tackle this. No, so I'd say that.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you for the great advice. And I will encourage everyone to continue the conversation. Reach out to Angela, reach out to Char from her team. She's here as well. And we will continue this very insightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Bloom.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again, Carolina, Fanny, Atosa, and all right. With that, we're already getting into the last two sections of the keynote program today. But before we dive into those topics, I wanted to take a moment to give thanks. We can't run this event on our own. We rely on a lot of supporters, including our sponsors. We're really grateful for the support that we get from a lot of companies, but especially from Deloitte, our headline sponsor for Bloom this year. So thank you for being here with us. Also, a huge thank you to all of our partners. We have a lot of co-location community partners co-hosting other events here. Maybe you've been to one of the breakfasts or going to another event in the afternoon. So thank you all for running this event with us. And then, of course, a really big thank you to the rest of the Trellis team. I get to stand here on stage, but obviously I don't run the show alone. There's over 70 people at Trellis making sure that everything runs smoothly. So thank you all for your amazing work. And can we get a round of applause for everyone? All right. Amazing. So in the past hour, we've looked at where we're at in terms of the overall nature strategy, what's happening on the ground with getting projects running. And now for the next two conversations, we're going to look at two of the solutions that can help you all get to where we want to be faster. One of them is data, how to manage data in a smarter, more efficient way. And the second one is leadership, how to show up as a better leader that gets more things done at your organizations. So, to focus on data, I'm really pleased to have here with us today Pavan Sukhdev, who's the co founder and CEO of Just Impact. Welcome to the stage, Pavan.
Thank you, and such a pleasure to be here amongst so many friends. I think it's still a too small community. That's probably why there are so many friends here. But today I'm here to give you my perspective on what is known as the nature data myth, which means, oh my gosh, biodiversity is the living fabric of this planet, its ecosystems, its species, its genes, and everything is going to hell in a handbasket. We are a corporation, we are 2/3 of the economy whose footprint is basically causing that hell in a handbasket. We should do something. We need data immediately. And we need how much data? Well, everything, surely. That sounds forbidding, and that's the nature data myth, which is we need everything, everywhere, all at once, by everyone. And that's not necessary, my friends. So my key message from, I hope, the next 7 minutes is tranquilo. So I'm going to begin by talking about two species which are in the rainforest, because you should be wondering, what am I if I'm a technology company, an energy company, a bank, an insurance company, a advertising agency? What on earth have I got to do with any of this? I'm not a mining company. I don't drill holes. I'm not a forest logging company or a farm. I'm not a construction agency or infrastructure developer. I'm not an irresponsible tourism company. So it's not me. It's not me. But let's think for a moment. I want to talk to you about two species. Begin with the Amazon in the rainforest. When you set out from the mouth of the Amazon, if you travel up 1,450 kilometers up the river, you reach the city of Manaus. At Manaus, where the Rio Negro meets the Solimões, the river, at the time I went there, was 8 kilometers wide. And then if you travel another teensy-weensy 41 kilometers through a rugged track and a logger's trail, you'll reach what is imaginatively called Camp 41. That is the late Professor Tom Lovejoy's camp, where he did a long experiment. I was there as a guest. I spent many, many nights there. And every night we would go to sleep in hammocks to the lullaby of crickets and frogs. And it was peaceful until one morning at 4 a.m. I was awoken by what appeared to be hell descending. It was a loud cacophony of noise. And someone muffled said, "Oh yeah, howler monkeys." So it's amazing to hear those tiny animals make so much noise, making the entire forest reverberate with that sound. The howler monkey is one of 15 species there. And as of now, that one is not threatened or endangered, but it's a very important seed disperser because, among other things, it eats fruit. And then I go to another rainforest, which is my favorite, actually, in North Queensland in Australia. Complex mesophyll vine forest. It's known that because they have these rattan vines. They call them lawyers' vines out there because once they latch onto you, those tendrils don't leave. And, in that rainforest, there are many wondrous animals and species, and among them is the southern cassowary. Now, this one is endangered. There's only about 1,500 of them left alive. It's a powerful creature. It's got claws that look like this, except about 1.5 times as big. And I request you, please, if you go there, please do. It's a beautiful place. If you go there, try not to get between a male cassowary and his chicks. And by the way, out here, it is actually the male that sits on the chicks and sits on the eggs and hatches them, and then looks after the chicks until they're too big to be called chicks, and then he shoos them off. So that's an interesting reversal of roles, I might imagine. But these two seed dispersers, and the cassowary is responsible for a lot of seed dispersal in the North Queensland rainforest. These two seed dispersers' habitats are shrinking. The rainforest is shrinking. And yes, not in Australia, but in the Amazon, part of the reason is the food system and its ingress into forested land. But the main reason, in fact, on average, why rainforests are shrinking is something as simple as climate breakdown. It is actually greenhouse gas emissions that are causing this shrinkage. So in that sense, those of you who are sitting in a bank with downstream impacts and financed emissions, those of you who are in any office or own a laptop, actually including myself, we are all causing the emissions which are causing the rainforest dieback, which is converting, among other things, the Brazilian rainforest into a grassland. So yes, we do have to own a degree of responsibility, but how much and when and exactly what am I or are any of you responsible for that particular howler monkey's loss of habitat and that particular cassowaries? Nobody knows. Neither do we need to know. That is my key message. So there is a lot of data, and you can work out what is your footprint on biodiversity, recognizing that biodiversity is a big thing. It's the living fabric of this planet, its ecosystems, its species, its genes. And that is a workable exercise. So what you do not need to do is this, which I call death by Google Maps, right? Try and find out where exactly is that location where I might have a footprint and where is it, and then you go further and one further, oh my gosh, and then you say, oh my God, it's pixelated, I can't see it, And how many of them are there? By the way, how many of those species are there in those two rainforests? We're talking about upwards of 1 million species, right? So even if I did by some magic know exactly what impact I have on southern cassowaries, I wouldn't know the rest. So no, you don't need to do any of that stuff. What you do need to do is to recognize that the state of nature is being measured by old institutions like governments and IUCN and UNEP and NGOs, large NGOs, and new institutions like the Nature Positive Initiative, which you must have heard yesterday and earlier today. So there are people measuring the state of nature. And yes, the state of nature is declining, and that is the problem. But it is all beginning with the economy that is destroying nature, and 2/3 of the economy is private sector. So in fact, it is pressures and therefore biodiversity footprints where we should begin. The state is where we end. There is no point getting paraplectic about the state of nature in any of those locations, even if you happen to be BHP, which is the company whose mine is that fuzzy pixelated piece on the right-hand side with the yellow dot. Because if you are BHP, here's what you can, in fact, do. If you really are concerned about the location, you will know what is in that location and you can go there. But more importantly, you can also find out if that's who you are, you can find out the location-based pressures that may happen to species which are there. And this is showing you all of the various species. And this is based on a system that we have developed, my company and I, called Just Impact. But more important than this is, what if you're not a mining company, not a forest, not a this, not a that? It is possible to work out the impacts of BHP on nature overall. And the interesting thing is that when we work it out, the way to do that is known as potentially disappeared fraction of species. And that potentially disappeared fraction, sorry, this is going a bit crazy out here. No, don't censor me as yet. It's got the potentially disappeared fraction of species is basically worked out knowing that, yes, your GHG emissions are known as part of your system. You know your water uses, that's part of your system. You know how much is your waste, toxic and non-toxic. You know how much is your water and land pollution. And so these 5 things, if you know what the volumes are, and by the way, most of you do because you've been publishing them quite happily in your sustainability reports and your CSR reports and so on. If you know those, and if you put them through the workings of the life cycle impact approach, then that will in fact give you the potential pressure in terms of potentially disappeared fraction of species. Now, I know the numbers, even though the system doesn't seem to be helping me. It's 4.8 times 10 to the minus 4. Does everyone know what that means? 4.8 times 10 to the minus 4 as a percentage probability of the disappearance of species through 1 year's operations of BHP. It doesn't mean very much. But if I convert that and say, aha, if you were to work out how much land cover would need to be depleted this year to generate the same effect on species diversity, that answer is more scary. That's 2,426 square kilometers. 2,426 square kilometers. That doesn't mean that that mining company is tearing up 2,400 kilometers of land. By no means. They just tear up maybe a few square kilometers of land for their mining. It's very targeted. But what is happening is that their water usage and their tailing dam waste and their SOx and their NOx are causing losses in biodiversity around the planet, right? It's not just in Australia, it's everywhere, in fact. That's what we need to know. That's called biodiversity footprint. Now, there are many ways. In fact, a paper was researched last year, Damiani et al., 2023, which looked at 60 different ways of measuring biodiversity footprint. And then it narrowed down its research to 23 of them. And then it narrowed those 23 down to approximately two, which included recipe and LC impact. These are two different methods. All of these top 23 are using a potentially disappeared fraction as a yardstick for calculating the footprint. So there is consistency. I think Eva mentioned that there is thankfully commonality of thinking, and I'm pleased to say that there is. If we follow this approach, then you as a company, doesn't matter whether you are a private consulting firm with a bit of power use or a massive energy giant like Enel, you can actually work out your nature footprint. And it doesn't require boil the ocean or melt the planet work. Yes, you need data, but very scientifically, carefully chosen data on your footprints. Of course, you should be worried if you're those 5 sectors I mentioned, which have direct impacts on biodiversity. You should be worried about what kind of direct impacts and where and so on, and have action plans against them. But if you're the remaining hundreds of sectors, which constitute, by the way, something like 97 or 98% of the invested assets of the big investors on this planet, if you're those, like me, small consulting firm with lots of data usage, we can work things out. And we can then take actions on our biodiversity footprints to ensure that we leave future generations an Earth which is worth living for and living in. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for those practical tips and also the entertaining stories. I appreciate it. And with that, we're at our last conversation. And for those of you wondering, we're running a little bit late, so we'll start lunch late as well. So you can all stay and then eat in a few minutes. Because we don't want you to miss this last conversation, which is about courageous leadership, which I think is a really important topic that we don't talk about enough when we get caught in the data world, in the accounting world, in the nature strategy world. But underneath all of it is the question of how can we show up as our authentic selves? How can we be the leaders in our companies, financial institutions that motivate colleagues, motivate the board, motivate your executive team to take these issues more seriously? So for that conversation, I'm very pleased to have with us today Isabel Cavelier, who is the co-founder and director of Mundo Común, and Janine Benias, who is the mother of biomimicry. Welcome to the stage. Sorry, I forgot a water bottle over here.
Hello, Janine.
How are you?
I'm
It's live. Hello.
It is.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being here. And I would like to start saying thank you for your attention. It's so rare nowadays. It's the rarest, most golden kind of energy. Thank you so much for paying attention to what we will talk about today together.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about you. It's personal this time.
Exactly. Maybe we start by taking a minute to invite you to consider for a moment what takes you to work every morning. Just for 3 seconds. What really gets you up in the morning and go to your job?
how often do we ask ourselves that question? But most importantly, how often do we feel that the reason for going to work every morning is actually reflected in what we see, for example, in the news every day? So I'm going to start with something. I'm going to start us off with something, Janine.
Yes.
Last night, the first Minister of Environment of Colombia, who's of course around, was saying a sentence that I found striking, and at the same time, sadly, I felt we are so numb to that sentence. Already, 94% of vertebrates of South America are gone. Are gone. 94% of vertebrates are gone. If that's not failure, what's failure? Right? So let's ponder that for a minute. For me, the paradox, the rift between what takes each one of us to work every morning and that data point has to bring us to a moment of taking perspective, observing ourselves from a little bit of a wider lens, from repeating what we've been repeating to do what we do.
Yeah, no wonder we're numb, right? And I think what one of the drivers of this extinction crisis is the fact that we have pushed down a few things. And that is, and I want to bring that back up. I'm a great believer these days in aspirational vows. And these are things that don't come from spreadsheets. They come from our souls, and they say who we are, the content of our character, as Martin Luther King would say, is in those aspirational goals, or aspirational vows. They're not goals. They're the things you whisper to yourself that on my watch, I am going to make sure that this happens. And then you guys, we all start to go to our companies and we start to, I think, mistake what our company is doing for who we are. So I want to get back to who you are and what you, I know we are not in this room. We are not the people preparing to go to Mars, right? That's not what brought you here. But that aspirational vow, and the grief when we hear those stats comes from the fact that somehow that aspirational vow that we made when we were perhaps very young, that we're what are we telling our younger selves that made that vow? But I literally make it a practice now before I roller skate in the halls of power, which I do, and you guys walk into that boardroom, to remind yourself of that aspirational vow, and that's you. And I believe you can bring your company to that level of depth, and you're going to do it through spreadsheets, but that's not really the wellspring of it. It's the vow that you have.
Wellspring. Oh, it went off. Yeah. We're okay.
Are you guys hearing? Oh,
Let's be patient. Here we are again.
we are now. Hear any of that? It was a whisper. I was talking about whispering. So,
well, how else is change going to happen if it's not by whispers?
yeah.
So, talking about the well, that place from where we do that vow. For me, the moment that I came there, and I was asking myself, what are we repeating wrong that we're getting it that wrong that we wake up every morning, go to work, and then 94% of species go extinct anyway? What are the deeper patterns beyond talking it forest conservation, water protection, climate change, biodiversity loss, polarization, supremacy, human supremacy over the rest of nature that we share this planet with? You name it. Gender inequality, injustice, all of it. What's underneath all of that? Why did we get it all that wrong? But not just to stay in the why, but to go further to say, what do I need to do different? For me, the upstream, the depth of the well, light that came was perhaps our deeper mindsets, our deeper paradigm of understanding ourselves as separate from the rest of nature, even in the best cases, the cases where, like, we in this room are trying to we see nature there as something, not necessarily someone, but something that I need to protect in order to get a better, comfortable life for humans. That still is a paradigm where I see nature there and me here. Nature there, humans here, even in the best of cases. A paradigm where you could call it a metaphysical thinking, where we understand the world as particle, a collection of particles, a very complex machine that I can fix. So I get myself into a very difficult, complex, data set, Excel sheet, complicated fix, but one day I'll get there and I'll fix it. And I thought, okay, maybe there is where I need to make a shift. Maybe we need to shift this paradigm to something else. And the question is how? Because it's easy to say, right? But we need to practice it. That's what our work is about. So how do you do that, Janine?
Well, it's absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That split in Western industrial culture has it's given us a lot of leeway to do things that we normally wouldn't do if we truly believed that we were part of this, right? But it has also made us incredibly lonely. So coming home to this planet as a welcome species is what I think our work is about. It's to remind ourselves we are nature. We're a very young species, one of the youngest, 200, 300,000 years old compared to 3.8 billion years. And so we have a lot to learn. And that's where biomimicry comes in. So and you may know biomimicry as learning from the natural world to create all kinds of new inventions that are earth friendly and time tested. And that is true. But in terms of what you all do and this conference, this this move to nature positive, which I hope we wave to net zero on the way, and make sure the aspirational vow is all the way to net positive. And for me, what that means is that we adopt the most biomimetic thing that any species can do, because every species of the 99% that have become extinct, there's 1% left, and they have learned a very simple thing. They've learned how to reciprocate, to return the favor, to create benefits beyond their borders, to create conditions conducive to life. So what that means is, from an ecological standpoint, when you go and look at a healthy forest, you can look at the outcomes of it, and this is where we should be getting our metrics, I think, nature's benchmarks. You can see that the water going into the forest is cleaner when it leaves. That's benefits beyond the borders. The air is cleaner. There's more wildlife coming, right? So these systems are active contributors downstream and downwind. And that's how this place creates conditions conducive to life. So the how for us as a company at Biomimicry 3.8 has been something called Project Positive, where we measure when we work with clients like Microsoft, Ford, Jacobs, HOK, Google. They're all in this cohort. And what they're doing is one of their biggest things that they make, their biggest artifacts, are their buildings and their sites. So we're challenging them to produce positive ecosystem services at the same level or even exceed the level of the wildland next door. We measure nature's benchmarks, get those benchmarks for 21 ecosystem services. We find that ecological performance, we measure the current performance, and we design into that delta.
And what we do at Mundo Común is work with you, the individuals, the humans, the network of relations that actually create all of that possibility. Fractally, to understand that actually that is something that starts with our own possibility of reciprocity and of creating positive impact, not only around us but within us. So when you think of, I love your metaphor, Janine, about what species that are successful do they reciprocate. When you think of life in the longer times of the earth, For a moment, take the perspective of the life on Earth in its 4.5 billion years. Life is the most successful energy transduction technology that has existed. Energy transduction, life takes energy from the sun and transform it in a myriad ways. And the successful forms of life transduce energy in a way that does not cannibalize the source of energy to total depletion. That's what humans are doing basically right now. We're not the only species that has been geomorphic, that has created conditions that change completely the Earth system. Several million years ago, cyanobacteria did this, and they created the atmosphere. Nothing less than that. The atmosphere that we breathe is the outcome of a toxic pollution crisis created by a species that completely changed the Earth in the same dimension as humans are doing right now. But what did they do? They are still the most present type of bacteria on Earth. They allow for life to exist. They created the capacity for the rest of life that was able to metabolize energy to continue, and they continued to metabolize energy, like what we could do, unless we completely deplete that. But where does that start? It starts with understanding that the first energy crisis that we are facing is our own human capacity to transduce energy in a way that preserves energy. So when each human that is part of a web of relations that then names itself Microsoft or Biomimicry Institute or BHP or whatever you name it, that web of relations is composed of humans whose capacity to transduce energy is depleting itself completely, i.e., you are depleting yourself completely, then how are we going as a species to maintain our capacity to really be part of a massive metabolism at the global scale that could continue to live, basically? So that's what we do. We work with the individuals, with the humans, and we restore our capacity to understand that we are nature, and we practice what it is. We practice it in the wilderness, what it is to create relationships based on care and interdependence, because that's basically the paradigm shift that we are looking for.
And that sense of agency, that taking care of yourself to take care of your company to take care of the planet, right? It really is true scientifically, just as you talked about the great oxygenation event, which was this huge pollution event. There was too much oxygen until organisms then went, wow, lots of oxygen, that's a resource, and started to use it, right? Those were individual organisms evolving those adaptations. And so there is, while you may feel that as individuals you cannot make a change, scientifically we know that big changes, big phase shifts happen from small fluctuations. They call them islands of coherence, right? Small fluctuations where parts of the system are getting it right. And there is a phase change in which those parts of that system getting it right find each other, and begin to amplify that signal for the next step. And I think, what frustrates us now, back to your original thing, is that it seems like it's too little, too late, and too few of us. But actually, that's how phase changes happen. Even in a they're finding now there's this thing called applied nucleation, which is about regeneration. So we're going to have to regenerate billions of hectares on this planet. And the best way to do that is look at natural regeneration. And what we do normally now is we go and we plant a tree every few feet, right, in a corn row, and then say, regenerate. That's not the way it works. What happens is there's a stick in the middle of an empty field, and a bird lands on it and brings a seed, and then another bird. And then you have a small island of healing. You've got this island of multiple species. And then you have the same thing happening over there and there. And the science tells us you only need 16% of the field to be covered by those islands. Those congeal, and that's how regeneration happens in the natural world.
To the 100%.
And that's what I see out here.
Right,
Each one of
exactly.
you is a small island of coherence in your company.
Exactly. Science has also called those islands of coherence refugia.
Yeah.
And it's all about learning how to be you and fractally to be a refugia for regeneration. And because the universe is fractal, if you've ever read the latest physics, then if you do understand that for yourself, that's where the biggest world creating agency lies, is being refugia. Our time is up, Janine, but
Yes.
this has been such a pleasure.
It has been a
Thank
pleasure.
you. And thank you so much.
Yeah. and
Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well done. All right. And with that, we're at the end of our program. And it's now up to us to take care of you. You have two lunch options. One is right here. You can stay in this room, have lunch, talk to, sit wherever you want, talk to whoever you would like. And if you would like to have a more structured conversation, we also have roundtable lunches on the outside terrace with a lot of great hosts and a lot of great conversations. So you get there by passing the registration desk, going all the way out and going all the way to the end of the terrace. And then for the afternoon program at 1:30, for those of you with an all access pass, the VIP workshops are on the 9th floor. And then back here, we will have our community and networking lounge. So thank you all for being here. Make the most of your time here. There were a lot of other people who wanted to be here. So you made it. Thank you.